Today's session is about academic integrity and Gen AI. So we're looking at this as kind of talking about academic integrity in general, but also in relation to Gen AI and about how you might start those conversations with your students. So I will be doing most of the session. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Laura Newman, the Library Education and Partnerships Manager at the University of Greenwich. So I'll be running most of the session, but my colleague Jules is here as well, and she will be talking about academic offences panels because she has far more experience of that than I do. So she'll be taking over at that point. Thank you for attending, Jules. Okay, so we will get started. I am going to share my screen. Start the presentation. I'm hoping everyone can see that. Yep.
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Jules. So for those of you who were at Melissa's session yesterday, we will be doing a Menti again today. So this should look familiar to you. So if you have a separate device, so a mobile phone that you are currently not on, you can scan the QR code on the screen and access the Menti that way. Or you can go to menti.com and then enter the code. So that is 14783243. So you can do that on another browser window if you are on your only device right now. So you can open up a browser on your phone or on your laptop, wherever you're on. So if you join the Menti, there will be some questions throughout just to make it a little bit more interesting for you guys. And also so that we can get some good feedback and some good engagement. So I'll just give you a minute or two to join that Menti, and then we will carry on. So I'll just leave those instructions on screen for a minute. I'm hoping all these Mentis are going to convince those of you that haven't used Menti before that it's a really good tool and you can start using it with your students if you haven't already. As Melissa said yesterday, we tend to use it quite a lot at Greenwich. So the academic and digital skills team that Jules and I are a part of, we use it quite a lot for our sessions because we do find that the students are more interested if they can kind of participate and answer questions, and you can do competitions on it as well, which they really love a lot of the time as well. So it's a really good tool for doing that. Okay, I'll just give it another sort of 30 seconds or so to see whether anyone else is able to join. If you're not able to join the Menti, of course, do feel free to contribute in the chat, or like I said, orally, by unmuting your mic to any of the questions if you want to. We're just happy to have the engagement. Okay, so in the interest of time, I will move on, but the code remains at the top of the screen here. So if any of you haven't joined, you can still go to menti.com and join using the code. So that will remain on the slides. Okay, so like I said, today we will be discussing academic integrity and also academic misconduct, because obviously those are two sides of the same coin, essentially. We'll be looking at some tools that can help you with this. We'll be looking at, like I said, how you kind of start having those open conversations with students about Gen AI and how that may impact on academic integrity and academic misconduct. And then we will look also at the University of Greenwich policies and procedures, which hopefully some of you will be familiar with already, but we'll just do a little reminder there just in case. So what do you think academic integrity is? So how would you describe it, I guess? Honesty, yeah, great one. Ethical, excellent. Honest reporting of work. Yep. Transparency. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, these are true. Yep. Yeah, these are absolutely all the kind of words that I would use to describe academic integrity. Engagement. Yep. Trust and fairness. Yep. I can see those in the chat. Authenticity. Very nice. Excellent word. Forgive me if I'm looking slightly off camera, by the way, because I've got my other screen on for the Menti. So I'm not looking at you. I'm just looking at the screen. Respect. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, these are great. Yeah, this is exactly how I would also describe it. Yeah. So I'm not sure if anyone said yesterday, no plagiarism, yeah. But the way Menti works with these kind of word clouds is the bigger the word, the more people have said it. So the fact that they're like honesty, ethical, fairness, authenticity are the biggest words, that means that like more of you have put those in as being the meaning of academic integrity. So it's good to see that we are all on the same page in terms of that. That's absolutely what we would think of as academic integrity. Um, so I've just put a little definition there. So again, you can see there's a lot of the same words there that you guys were using. So we would say it's demonstrating honesty, transparency, and integrity in all areas of academic practice. And it's learning and showing those good academic principles, which is what we want from our students, right? So why is it important? So why do we need to talk about academic integrity and make sure our students practice it? Yeah, to help students learn. Yeah, ensure the learning, make sure everything's fair and just. Yeah, to show transparency. Yeah, for property right, exactly like intellectual property. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, to validate the learning. Yeah, the fair evaluation, building trust, credibility. Yeah, lovely. I hadn't even thought of credibility as a word, but that's a lovely word. Builds trust. Yep, it helps them learn. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think these are all really great points. Um, yeah, preparing professional ethics, exactly. Let's not forget that it's not just about academia, it's also thinking ahead to their future careers as well. Yeah, making sure that we're fair, it builds excellence, it's authenticity. Yeah, yeah, great, exactly. Sometimes I think it's quite hard to articulate that, isn't it? Like we all know academic integrity is really important, but we sometimes it's hard to put that into words. So I think it's nice to kind of think about this. Because obviously if you are going to talk to students about it, you do need to be able to say this and explain why it's so important. Okay, so again, we would say a lot of the same things that you would. So it's important because it's how they succeed, right? That's what the students want. They want to succeed. It's how they succeed by showing academic integrity. It demonstrates that good practice, shows the honesty and the ethics that we were talking about. And then, like you said, Rwandi, it gives them those sort of professional ethics that are going to be needed in the workplace. Because again, that's what we're looking at with our students, right? Is preparing them for the workplace, most of them. So I think it's really important that we think about it outside of just academia as well. It's about making sure that they have that honesty, that transparency, that kind of ethical foundation that they will need once they go into their careers. So how do they practice this? So obviously we would say they practice this through good research practice. So finding good scholarly sources, so journal articles, for example, like Melissa talked about yesterday. Acknowledging those sources. So I know some people have said that in the word cloud. So making sure they have citations and references there as that acknowledgement of where the information is coming from. That they are showing transparency there. So again, that came up a lot. So being honest about what they're using and where things are coming from, and giving that attribution of work as well. So not just to professional sources, but also, for example, in group work, right? And not taking credit for work that another student has done, for example. So which of these would we consider to be academic misconduct? You can select as many as you like. So which of these would be examples of academic misconduct? Just going to give that a minute or so to let you all vote. Okay, so plagiarism is the highest voted one there. I think that's the most common form of academic misconduct that we all think about, right? Okay, so I don't think that's moving anymore. So, oh no, moving a little bit. Still going. So yeah, so plagiarism obviously is one we all recognize, right? That's a nice kind of easy one. So plagiarizing somebody else's work, so copying and pasting essentially and not giving any credit for where that information came from. Falsifying data is the second highest vote there. So yeah, so obviously if a student is pretending that they have done some research and they haven't, or they're changing their data in some way that they've collected, that's obviously very unethical, and therefore we would also count that as academic misconduct. Collusion, we would also count as academic misconduct. So colluding on work. So for example, if there is an individual piece of coursework, but two students work together to write the assignment, and then they both submit that assignment that they've worked on together as an individual piece of work, that would be considered academic misconduct because, again, it is unethical. When it is an individual piece of work, it is unethical to work on it with other people and then submit it purely as your own work. So we'd also count that as academic misconduct. And then using GenAI to find resources, we would not generally say that is academic misconduct, although of course it would depend on whether they acknowledge that or not. So as Melissa talked about yesterday, the students can absolutely use GenAI in their research process, and that's totally fine as long as they acknowledge that fact. So we wouldn't generally say it as academic misconduct, although it depends on the context, to be fair. So for those of you who are thinking of it as then not being reported, you're right, that would then count as academic misconduct. So obviously there's only a few examples there. So like I said, we would basically say it's any offence which is considered unethical in academic practice. So some examples would be plagiarism, collusion, the misuse of GenAI, falsification of data, or misrepresentation of data. Those are just some examples. Obviously, there's quite a large range. And anything which is included within the assessment misconduct procedure. So how should we be dealing with this with our students? So assessors, so that may be some of you who are marking the work, should be reporting those offences. There are different categories of those offences, and some of those will go into investigations or the academic offences panels. And for some of those where the students are found guilty, there will be sanctions applied to them. And I've linked there to the assessment misconduct procedure for those of you that don't know it. And like I said, we will share all these slides afterwards so you have all the links. So this is where I'm going to pass over to Jules to talk about the academic offences panels. Do you want to just tell me next slide, Jules, when you want them?
I don't mind taking control if you want me to. I'll just go
It's
back
up to you.
to the Menti. Yeah, is that all right? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. You want me to stop sharing?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, just get it ready. Share. Oh, save you that. Okay. So, okay, I know that it hasn't given me rights yet. Okay, open Mentimeter. Does it work? Okay, that one works. So I don't know how you can see my screen. Can you see the?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see the notes bit.
Okay. So that's my one. So I need to start the presentation here. So that's what. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, better. So thank you for joining us today. What we're focusing on really is the way in which you're going to be making sure that you're supporting the students in a way that if they are suspected of academic misconduct, you're able to support them and improve their learning experience so that they won't do this again in any other assessments for the future. And the academic offences panel, the procedure that you've got to follow if there is a case for misconduct for any assessment that you're marking. So it is really important that you know, not all students are colluding. They're not making these mistakes on purpose, and we've got to really understand that it's their first year of studies and they do make mistakes. And what I feel is it is an important fact is that we've got such good students, and particularly in that first year, we've got to really look at the way we address this mistake so that they can learn and they can really make this improvement as part of their educational experience. And this is the process that you're going to be going through because it's an important part for us to really focus on. Okay. So with any case, the first step is really about the approach that you're taking, because we need to make sure that you're following the institutional values of being inclusive, collaborative and impactful. And you need to make sure that if there are any misconduct cases, that they need to be approached in line with these values. And you've got to give the student a chance to explain what they did or did not do, and where additional information is required, an investigation is necessary. And so when we're, you know, when you look at my slide, you know, I've given you some guidelines here. You've got to raise a CP1, and it's done through the system, it's done through portal. An email obviously would be generated as soon as you raise a CP1, which goes through to the standards and conducts team for your faculty. And for category 1 offences, because this is the common one that we tend to see, this is where you will have a chance to meet up with the student to really understand whether you think that the student has not behaved properly or ethically, and if it's serious, then it would take the investigation case to the next level, so would go on to CP2 or CP3, and always capture your evidence. So we use Turnitin. You would download that the report through GradeMark, and then upload it to the SharePoint area that we have for you to use to make note of this offence. And the more information you put in, the better. And it's quite nice and simple and easy to follow the form is. So I'm sure that you'll be able to follow that accordingly. So this is what I do. I'm marking my assignments. I've picked up a piece of work. I've thought, actually, this is not your work. This is AI. This is not one bit of it is your original thought, your original thinking. You hadn't shown me evidence of wider reading, research, etc. And I will then therefore send an email to that student whilst marking. And this is really important because you've got to make sure that you've given them the opportunity. And this is that initial conversation with the student, and you need to make sure that you've had this conversation with the student before our PAB, so our Progress Award Board. So all offences, academic offences, need to be investigated and resolved and completed on the system. If a student doesn't respond to your request, even after the issue, and you might have sent them a reminder, just to say, by the way, I've booked in a meeting with you, please make sure you attend. And it's fine for you to make that decision on their behalf, because we want to resolve the case at that point. And so please do so. And so what we will get you to make note of is, at this point, what I'm talking about here is a category 1. So the category 1, you'll have an opportunity to make the notes on the system in the notes section, which is only visible to staff afterwards. And so this is just an example of what I would do, and if it's a CP1, okay. If I find that within the meeting there is misconduct, I would then either refer it to the academic offences panel, depending on the seriousness of the allegation. And so what students can expect in this interview. And so you've got the opportunity, this is what I would say to the students, they have the opportunity to respond to the allegation. And it's about really you providing the feedback on the work that they have submitted and providing them with guidance to avoid future allegations of misconduct. And again, what we try and do is we get the students to definitely book an appointment with the academic and digital skills team to really explain what happened, and just to make sure that they know what it is they need to do for future work. And so the CP1 is really important. This is where students have to answer to the case of misconduct, but we also have a responsibility to put together all the notes for the allegation and have that attention to detail, okay? And so again, the assessment, what they've said, I tend to record the meeting as well, just so that I've got it for my own records, in case a student says, no, I didn't say that. I had an appointment with a student who basically was saying, no, I promise I didn't do that. And then towards the end, he was like, yeah, I know, I did actually just put it into this AI, and they did all my assignment for me. And so at the end, they did, admit to it. So when we're talking about a full-on investigation interview, that the AOP involves much more of the academic conduct team and officers who would also be in attendance. So the best practices, what we tend to say, is speak to the student beforehand and try and figure out what happened. And then if it's like a case where the student has needs, like wasn't aware that referencing was important, a part of the process, we can then say, okay, you know what, we will make sure that we can help you so that you will not do this in the future. But it's about having it recorded on the system. So we've got to really think about the way that we're putting this through to the system. And the process isn't, it's intended to be fact finding. It's a conversation. It's not accusatorial or accusing them. It's basically for you to contact the student, and you've got to be clear about this, obviously in an email. I just say, oh, let's catch up about your marking. I don't give much more information than that. And then if you believe that the student isn't being entirely open with you, don't confront them on this, but do note it in the section. And this is why it's led to the investigation being led further, okay? And so after the conversation, you've got to really decide which category of offence it is. And it is all in the assessment misconduct policy that Laura referred to. But all cases are assessed on the balance of the probabilities based on the evidence available. And so what we want you to do is make sure you keep a record of this so that you've got something to look back on. I've given you a scenario here. I'm not asking you to do anything at this moment, but I do want you to focus on what would you do, especially if it's academically high, the quality of the work, similarity score is low, but the writing style is really significantly different from previous submissions. So I want you to think about what evidence you would gather, and what would be your concerns. And that's all I want you to do, just to reflect on this particular scenario. Now, When I teach this session to students, I would be giving them advice as part of the academic and digital skills team to really help them overcome any nerves, because they've been invited to an interview, they're not sure what this conversation will be about, and they're thinking specifically, what is the process? What's going to happen? Are they going to throw me out of university? And it's for me to then provide them with the context of, did you follow the assessment brief? Did you look at the marking rubric? And I give students instructions on things that they might consider prior to attending this misconduct interview with the panel. And in this instance, what I tell students is to complete the Integrity Matters module so that it shows the panel that, I've actually realised my mistake. They know there will be a penalty imposed, but maybe the penalty won't be so high because they've really looked at the way that they could improve their academic learning going forward. So it's about really helping them improve on what they've done wrong. Now, this is from the document, the misconduct policy document. Again, I'm not going to read through this, but it's quite a long document. We expect students to read this. This is why we run these sessions for students, so that we're really helping them understand that there are consequences if you do not follow the rules. And we will make it clear to them that, we will award you with a good grade if you do things following the academic conduct and quality that your tutors are requiring from you. But if you don't, this is the penalty that, there will be penalties, and, just to make you aware. Because I know that I read the misconduct policy and I was like, what? So much information. How are students expected to follow this? Now, just going to go through the offences. Now, it is in the document, so this applies to most students in year one. And it could be that they've not referenced properly, or they pop the link in for ChatGPT in their reference list, and then you say to them, you haven't given me a declaration, I'm okay with you using it, but in future, please take care. If I feel like it doesn't need to be a CP1, I will make the notes in grade mark to say, look, I'm letting you know that I've informed the module leader who I'm giving the final say whether to raise this as an academic misconduct case. You really need to speak to me in class, so I need to make sure you've contacted your academic tutor. I'll write this all in the feedback and in an email, so the academic tutor is in part of the email. Module leader, sorry, is part of that email too, just so that they are aware that this student needs extra support. And so an academic offence category 1 is just, the general skills that we expect all students to have, and it could be that they just didn't know that in-text referencing was something that they needed to follow, and it was chunks in grade mark that have identified it's just a cut and paste scenario. But you've got to look at the severity of that. If it's red on grade mark, the RAG rating, red, orange, yellow, blue, green, etc., it really depends on where that falls. If it's completely red throughout, and all they've shown you is copy and pasting skills, that would definitely be a category 1, and penalty would need to be applied. Category 2, it could be at any time of their studies, and it's, again, this is copying and pasting or using unattributed material, or it's evidencing AI has been used and learning actually hasn't taken place. So the email that I showed you earlier was of a student who basically had ChatGPT write the whole assignment, sent an email, asked the student to attend, they didn't attend, and so I put as a category 2, and I minus the grade. And so undergraduate, I gave them a 40 because I knew it wasn't their work. Why am I going to give you a 50 or a 60 for something that you haven't written? It's ChatGPT's work. And then I gave them a 40 because they haven't shown me any academic learning or skills or development of original thought or understanding. And then they didn't attend the meeting, so I minused it by 10%, so they got 30 overall. Now, some people might think that's harsh, but I feel like as a module leader, that was not them demonstrating learning. Collusion is very rare, but it does happen. And so this is really important that we do basically raise it as a category 2. They think they're helping their friend by giving them the assignment, and that student actually copies it and then submits it as their own work, and therefore this has to be investigated as well. So, and it has happened where both students were called in, and what happened was one student submitted it in the original deadline and the other student submitted it in the EC, or it was reset. And so we were able to figure out where the offence occurred because we had the interviews. And so here's, again, penalties explained. Category 3, I know, like my manager was saying, why haven't you talked about category 3 on your slides? And the reason is it's because I haven't had many of these investigative interviews, these conversations with students that have led to any category 3 offences. They tend to be, we tend to have this conversation. They've identified their mistakes and they've admitted their mistakes and where they've gone wrong, and they've chosen to deal with this through going through the academic and digital skills team, completing the Integrity Matters course, and therefore we've agreed with them that this is going to be the outcome of the category within their record on the system. I've forgotten what the system's called. I think it's academic misconduct form or something. It's like that. It's through portal anyway, you'll see it. So category 3, this is the offences panel. Now, anytime I've ever had an offences panel, I don't recall that it threw them out of university, or it was recommended to the VC. They were withdrawn, no exit. So I've never got to that stage, so I can't really comment. But the documentation is there, and fail, you're not allowed to come back to the university, etc. I haven't ever got to that stage. Main ones I've been party to are category 1 and category 2, and even the category 2 level 5 offence haven't really got to. The majority of the offences and the seriousness has been level 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you're ever unsure, please do contact us as a team and we'll try and help you. And I know Sharon Pereira, who's my head of department, she's been part of these investigative interviews on the panel. And so it's very rare that a 0 grade has been imposed, but it can happen. Okay, so just a little reminder, it can occur. Academic offences can occur, and what we need to do is make sure that we are getting in touch with those students, and if it's a serious offence, we need to refer to an investigative interview. Please make sure that you keep evidence of the conversation with the student and all essential information, such as record it, don't do it in person, do it on Teams, so that you've got all this evidence to refer to the investigative interview panel. And really, it's sometimes you might think that there's clear evidence of AI misuse, but your panel is going to want the clear evidence of that. And so you've really got to help the students understand the clear guidance, but also how to engage with AI appropriately. Okay. And so, please don't feel that by reporting an offence, you're making more work for yourself, but do make sure that you are really helping these students grow and reflect on where they went wrong so that they don't make these mistakes in future. And once it's recorded on the system, obviously if they get caught again, it would be much more of a higher level of penalty that will be applied. Okay, that's all me done. I hope I didn't keep you too long. Thank you very much, guys. If you have questions, let me know.
Thanks, Jules. If you stop presenting, I will start presenting again. But does anyone have any questions for Jules before she leaves us?
Excellent. So it's a good document. It's really clear, but I feel like some of our students, it's too much words on a document and they might not want to read that. And therefore we will have that responsibility to really help them through that process. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Jules, it's still showing as you presenting for me.
Oh,
I think you have to like exit the whole thing.
I'm exiting
it
the whole thing. Yes, I've just done that. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. Samia, you have a question?
Yes, I do, please. Sometimes the students refuse totally to admit. They say this is totally my work, and I'm sure I did not plagiarize or so in this case, when it is on Turnitin, there's a high level of AI, but the students insist that it's their work. What would you do in this case?
I tend to have that conversation with the module leader present as well. And then we show them the report and we said, well, why is this showing that this is an exact match? You know, we're really explicit. We're sharing our screen, we're recording the interview, and we're able to show them that it's like copied and pasted, etc., or it's only a few words have been, you know, changed, etc., so that they can see quite clearly this is the reason we're having this, you know, investigative interview with you. And you know, I feel like it's that admission of guilt that sometimes is the problem. They don't want to see themselves, the students see themselves as doing something wrong. I would have obviously someone there, have your module leader there, and then you know, if they will still not accept it, you will still have to either refer it further to the panel to consider, or you decide, well, I'm not happy with your explanation in terms of, what I've done before is I've said, show me your drafts, show me your submission to Studiosity, because we've got Studiosity within Moodle, which shows that they've actually been working on the document and improving it. They might have had different versions. Sometimes on Words, it shows how many times you've saved the document, etc. If they've got clear evidence of a folder with research, notes, a plan, you know, this is the type of evidence we want to see in terms of their build-up of their knowledge. And if they don't have anything, then this is why I would decide myself that no, I'm going to classify this as category, you know, category 2, 1, or level 4, etc. So I would say make that academic decision if they're still not admitting to.
Okay, thank you very much. So evidence, this is the only word that we want. Okay,
yeah,
thank
as
you.
much evidence, yeah.
Drafts of how they came up with a piece of work and
plan,
yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to say, like, you know, to students when they start any assignment, you know, they've got OneDrive, they've got something like 4 terabytes or something, so they've got the space. Save all the research, show me the learning, show me how the thought process and the way that you went about building upon that knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Jules. Okay, does anyone have any other questions for Jules before we let her go to probably another meeting?
Yeah, so see you guys soon. Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you all, and good luck.
Thanks, Jules.
Bye.
Okay, we are going to carry on. So thank you to Jules. But we are going to go back to talking about academic integrity and specifically move on to using it in terms of GenAI, because Samia, like you said, there is increasingly more evidence of students using AI to write assignments, but not necessarily admitting that. And that's where we think it's really important that we do make sure we're kind of openly talking to the students about that right from the start, so that it's not just a kind of punitive thing, but it is very much an encouraging thing of talking about why it's so useful. So if you're still on the Menti, we I'm just going to start this little section off with a little question. So, do you feel confident in spotting this? So obviously, Samia, you have said that you obviously did have that student where you did spot it and you were certain that that was Gen AI, which is great. But sometimes it can be difficult, right? So do you feel confident spotting this? If you are marking students' work or you are supporting them with their work, so I don't mark, but I support students with work, so they quite often show me drafts of things. So yeah, do you feel confident in spotting those signs where they have used Gen AI and they haven't acknowledged that in any way, or they are potentially passing that off as their own work? Just interested to kind of see where we're at with this. Okay, so we're about 50-50 at the minute. So some people do feel confident with that, and some people feel that they're confident with that sometimes, but not all of the time. Okay, great. Oh, we've moved into more people on the sometimes vote there. Yeah, so I would probably agree with that, to be honest, to say that some of the time I feel like I can absolutely spot when something is Gen AI or when students have used Gen AI. And a lot of the time it's very obvious to us, right? But sometimes it's not entirely obvious. I mean, obviously, Gen AI, as Jimmy talked about the other day, is constantly evolving. It's getting better and better. And so it can be quite hard for us as educators to keep up with that, essentially. So hopefully a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is going to help with that. So a few examples of how you can spot this, and I'm sure some of you are doing this already. So a very easy way still is to check a reference list from Gen AI. I think Jimmy talked about this the other day. You can actually, ironically, use Gen AI to check the reference list for Gen AI, which I really enjoy the irony of that. But so obviously a lot of Gen AI models will either hallucinate references still, or they will kind of do a mismatch. So like Melissa talked about yesterday, where the journal will exist, but the title of that journal article doesn't actually exist within that particular journal. And that's obviously because the way Gen AI works is it brings information from lots of sources and then it synthesizes it and puts it together. But obviously you can't do that with journal articles, not with the titles of them anyway. So that's a really easy way of checking, is you can check your students' reference lists, you can run it through Copilot or any other Gen AI you're using and say, give me the original links to these references. And then if it can't find the links, or it gives you links and you click through and they don't actually exist, or it's not the correct link, you know that the student has used Gen AI to create those references. So again, that's very good evidence, like Jules was talking about. Check again, do the references match the citations? So again, have they done that work themselves? Have they made sure that they are matching up that work? Or have they just taken some references from Gen AI and plonked them into their reference list to make sure they have more things on their reference list, and haven't actually used them in their assignment? So again, that's a really good way of checking. Check that the text shows criticality. So as a lot of you probably know, Gen AI tends to be fairly neutral. So it kind of doesn't really give opinions on things. And therefore, a lot of the time it doesn't show criticality. But obviously, we expect our students to show criticality within their assignments. So if there is no sign of criticality, if everything is very neutral, that can sometimes be a sign of Gen AI being used. Again, is there a balanced viewpoint? So if a student has put into Gen AI and said, give me information on X topic, and Gen AI will quite often just give one point of view on something, particularly if the wording of the question is about, give me the positives of this, or tell me why this thing is so good. Whereas obviously, again, we would expect them to show both sides of the argument. So again, that can sometimes be a sign. If the text is disjointed, that can quite often be a sign. So if different paragraphs have different sort of tone of voice, that may sometimes indicate that they have copy and pasted one particular paragraph from GenAI. Or like Jules was saying, if you can very clearly see a difference between one piece of work and another piece of work, again, that can be a real sign there that GenAI has been used in one of those pieces of work. So again, it's about you knowing your students and recognizing that. And then again, looking at the grammar and the vocab, again, if it's a different tone, if it's written very differently, then again, that's quite often a sign. So these are obviously just some examples, and it doesn't necessarily mean for sure that they have used GenAI, but it can be like a sort of red flag for you to pay a little bit more attention. So those are some easy ways of just seeing whether something may be wrong and then kind of looking into it in a little bit more detail. So your turn. We're just going to do a little exercise. So on the next slide, I've got a little excerpt from an essay, and I would like you to think about whether you think it is academic misconduct. So I'm going to give you a few minutes just to read this essay, or the little bit of this essay, and then have a think about whether there are any signs of the possible use of Gen AI within that. So I will stop talking for a couple of minutes and just let you look at that. So I'm just going to give you another 2 minutes to read that and have a think, a little reflection on it, and then we will have a little discussion. Okay, I'm hoping everyone has had a chance to read that at this point and to have a little reflection on what you think of that. So I'm just going to ask you to vote on what you think. So do you think that sample is academic misconduct, or maybe academic misconduct? Because of course we can very rarely say things with certainty. But what would be your initial thought? Are you unsure? Do you think it probably is? Do you think it probably isn't? This is completely anonymous, obviously, so I have no idea who's voting what. I think it's just good for us to get an idea of that. Okay, so at the minute, the no votes are winning. Oh, maybe's going up. And of course, it's totally fine to just, not entirely be sure or think, yeah, it might be, but I don't know. Because of course, like we were saying, a lot of the time we need the evidence there, right? It's hard to have certainty in these things. But of course, you need to know whether you recognize something or not, or whether something may be a red flag for you. That's, I guess, what we're looking at here. Okay, so maybe is still the top vote. I'm just going to leave that on screen and see whether anyone else wants to vote. But in the meantime, does anyone want to come in on what you think? So I can see in the chat, there's a couple of comments. So Rwandia said, based only on the content shown in the image, it would not be appropriate to conclude it's academic misconduct. Ahmed has said the second paragraph is a summary from AI, which is from when you use it to search about something. So those are two differing points of view there. Does anyone want to come in and say anything further? Say what you think, whether there are any signs there. Noah?
Hi. So I at the first glance, I thought like, okay, that's well written a bit, but I'm not 100% sure if it's the students' work or not. I usually base my opinion on the level of students, if I know the students well. So sometimes
Of
it's
course.
too well written for that student to do this good in writing. I
Yeah.
mean, but then you'd have doubts, like you'd feel like maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's their work, maybe they did well in preparation and everything. So when I read this the first time, I felt like I'm not 100% sure, maybe it's good. And then I started taking notes of what you said earlier, because some things I've never heard of in detecting AI, like for example, if it's a biased opinion, or if it's not an opinion, but rather not a balanced view, but rather like this is good because 1, 2, 3, and that's it. So also missing the citation. So because there are quotation marks, but then there's no citation there. And this could make you doubt, like maybe the student forgot to add it, but it's too long of a sentence, and it's too straightforward, like it's not a balanced opinion. So I think it could be, like, I'm one of the maybes, so I think it could be because of these reasons, but I would discuss it with the student first, because it's not 100% sure thing.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. Like you say, if you have that instinct, and of course you're absolutely right that a lot of the time it's based on your knowledge of the student. So of course I am just giving you a random excerpt here, which makes it much harder. But you're absolutely right that if you did think that there was a possibility there, then exactly the next step would be to talk to the student about it. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Samia, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. For me, I think I would consider this as some form of plagiarism, because there's a quotation and there's no citation of a quotation. This is the first thing that took my attention. There's a quotation mark, so they actually copied this from somewhere, but they never said from where. Where did you get this? So this would be a red flag for me. So that's why I think, yes, here there's a problem. It might be that they forgot, just as Noha said, but in all cases, I would have to go back to the student. And of course, the second paragraph looks more professional than the writing in the first part of the essay. That's all
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, agreed, exactly. Yeah, so again, I can see there's some comments in the chat about that where there is a quotation and there is no citation. So again, like you say, we don't know for certain that that is deliberate, right? That may have just been accidental. So the student may have genuinely meant to put a citation in there and they didn't. They just forgot. And that's where, exactly like you say, you would talk to them first and give them the benefit of that doubt, because we cannot assume that they are deliberately committing academic misconduct. But so I would say, similar to Noha and Samia and the comments in the chat, that it might count as academic misconduct, because there are a couple of red flags there, like you have said. So thank you very much for picking up on them. Very impressed with all of you that did there, because of course it is very difficult, especially when you don't, like Noha said, you don't know the student. So one red flag that many of you did see there is exactly the quote with no citation. So whether that is deliberate academic misconduct or not, that does count as plagiarism, because there is no acknowledgement of where the source came from. So of course, that would need to be flagged. And as you've said, the next step would be to talk to the student about that. The second red flag, which again, you brought up there, is that there is a change in tone there between those paragraphs. So again, that is a little bit of a red flag, because that implies that those paragraphs were written not by the same person. So the first paragraph, as Samira, I think you picked up on, was written in the first person. So it was very much, I think this. And then the next paragraph was written in third person instead. So it was talking about the research rather than I think the research means this certain thing. So again, that would be potentially a sign of the use of GenAI and academic misconduct. So you're all absolutely right that, like, you wouldn't know for certain, but that would certainly be an example of where you might instinctively think there is something wrong there. And this is where you kind of want to be looking out for those signs. So that was a really good exercise. Thank you for those of you that took part in that. I'm really pleased to see that so many of you can identify these potential red flags and have a look at it. And this is really, it's just practice, right? Of us just looking at this and taking note of these types of signs that might lead us towards these decisions. So Jules mentioned integrity matters earlier, so I'm just linking to it here. So all franchise students can access this. It's a course on Moodle. It's self-directed, and it is specifically about academic integrity and academic misconduct. So as Jules said, if you do have a conversation with a student where you're worried they may have committed academic misconduct, this can be a really good thing to refer them to in that conversation, because it helps them to develop that learning and make sure they don't make those mistakes again. So it's self-directed. They can do it in their own time. You can just send them the link. It's interactive, so it's in a kind of game format. It's got information on it about the use of GenAI and how that would be considered academic misconduct. So it's been updated this year. And it's constantly checking understanding. So there's constant sort of questions and quizzes for the students to ensure that they know what academic integrity is, essentially. So this is a really good place to point your students towards. Of course, you can point them towards it at the start of term as well. It doesn't have to be once they've done something wrong. You can preempt this. But if you do have those conversations, this is a really good place to say to them, okay, so you've made some mistakes. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen again, because if it does happen again, it would be much more serious. So why don't you go away and complete this course to make sure you fully understand what you are and aren't allowed to do within your academic work. And then you kind of have that reassurance that you know they've done that kind of training, essentially. So that's a really good thing to point them towards. And I can put the link to that in the chat later. I don't think I can copy it from here directly, can I? Oh, I can. Okay. Let me just put that in the chat now then, in case anyone wants it. Oh, no, that's just the presentation. Never mind. I'll do it later. Okay, so that's Integrity Matters. And then, of course, we also have Studiosity, which I think a lot of you should be aware about. So again, this Studiosity is a GenAI system, but this is specifically to support academic integrity and academic writing. So students can upload their drafts of their assignments to Studiosity, and the AI model will give them pretty much immediate feedback on how they can improve it. And it will pick up on things like where they have a quotation but no citation, for example, or where they have an incorrect citation, or where their writing is inconsistent. So things like this, where it will help them to, again, like we were talking about earlier, develop that learning, because that's what we want, right? Is we want them to be learning these skills themselves. So that's a really good way of supporting that and developing that good academic practice. So I know a lot of the partner students do use this, but again, it's a really good place to recommend. So again, if you're finding when you're looking at their work that maybe they're struggling with the grammar or the tone, for example, Studiosity can be a really good tool for them. So say to them, the next time you write a draft, I want you to upload it to Studiosity and look at the feedback. And of course, they can bring the feedback to you and say, can you help me understand this? But it helps you because you don't then have to go through with a fine-tooth comb and pick up on all the kind of grammatical errors as well. So again, that's a really good tool for them to use. And again, the link is in the slides there. Okay, so I thought I'd just do a very quick definition of GenAI as a sort of, make sure we're all on the same page. Because of course, almost everything has AI nowadays, so artificial intelligence. But we are specifically talking about GenAI, right? So generative AI. So that is AI which is creating original content, because of course that is our main concern in terms of academia, that students are using it to create that content and therefore not creating the content themselves. So obviously Jimmy talked about this quite a lot the other day, so I'll just do that very quickly. So do you think that your students are using GenAI for university work? General consensus so far is yes. Yeah, I've got a couple of yeses in the chat as well. Lovely. One maybe. Okay, so most of you are saying yes to this, and I would agree with you. So in my experience, most students are using GenAI within their university work nowadays. Obviously, that is a generalization. I have come across some students who are absolutely against GenAI and will not use it at all. But they are, in my experience, very much in the minority. So yeah, I'm glad to see that that is the consensus across the board, that we all think that. So that's why it's so important we have these conversations with them really early on, right? Because they are using it, whether we want them to or not, they are using it. Like, that is a fact for most of us. So that is the current state of events, that most students will use GenAI in one form or another. So if they're going to use it anyway, it's our responsibility to talk to them about using it appropriately, ethically, and within the boundaries of academic integrity. And so that's where we think it's really important we have these proactive conversations with them. So we don't wait until they commit academic misconduct and then we talk to them about it. We talk to them about it right at the start. So we talk to them about it at the start of term. We talk to them about it when we first start talking about their assignments. We talk to them about it when we have one-to-ones with students, because if they're using it anyway, we should use any and all opportunities to have those open discussions about it so that they know they are allowed to use it if they want to, but how are they allowed to use it? So on that basis, the next question is, do you as staff know what the Greenwich guidance is around GenAI? So those of you who attended Jimmy's session the other day may have a little more knowledge into this, because I think Jimmy mentioned it briefly the other day. Okay, 50-50 split so far. We'll just give that a few seconds and see if anybody else votes on this. Okay, the yeses have just got it at the minute, just winning out. As to this. Okay, so Greenwich does have guidance on the use of AI. So we currently have published guidance to staff and students about the use of GenAI within the university context. But a lot of students don't know this. As Jules was saying earlier, they don't read the policies, the guidance a lot of the time. And that's fair, because it would be a lot of things for them to read. But this is where we come in, right, as staff. So we need to make sure we understand the guidance, so then we can have these conversations with those students. So if you're not sure about the guidance, that is totally fine. This is why we do these kinds of sessions, right? So that we can discuss these kinds of things. So some of you, so just over half of you, are certain that you do know the guidance, and that's great. For those of you who don't, or you're not sure, don't worry about it, because that is what I am here for. So we do have the guidance, and I will talk about it very briefly in a minute. But off the back of that, how do you feel about talking to students about using GenAI? So are you confident discussing with your students how they can use GenAI within their university work? Okay, so quite a lot of yeses. One person's not sure. A couple of people not sure. Yeah, fair enough, because again, it is a complicated field. And of course, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are telling our students the right information. So that's understandable if you're not entirely confident about that, because you're worried about saying the wrong thing. Okay, but it's good to hear that most of you are confident around that, because like I say, we should be doing this and we want to do this, right? So we need to feel confident, because of course we don't want to talk about something we don't feel confident in. That's totally fair. Oh, I think somebody is unmuted. I'm not sure who that is. I'm just going to mute everyone, just so that we don't have any background noise. If you need to unmute yourself to talk, then obviously please feel free to unmute yourself. Just doing that for everyone's benefit. Okay, great. So most of you do feel confident which is excellent news to hear. So the guidance is here. So again, we've got the links here. So like I said, we do have guidance for both staff and students about the responsible use of GenAI. And like I said, you'll get all these slides afterwards, so you will have all of the links there as well. Just seeing whether I have summarized that on the next slide or not. No. So essentially what the guidance boils down to, for those of you who aren't sure, and I would recommend you have a look at the documents, but essentially what it boils down to is that we support the use of GenAI within teaching and learning, as long as it is acknowledged and used in an ethical manner. Okay, and we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So again, the links are there for you to look at in your own time, but that's kind of the core of the policy. So the guidance is currently being updated, and we will make sure those changes are communicated to all of you as partners as soon as those are live. So I think they are hoping to have that new guidance live for the start of the next academic year, so kind of September, October. But the intention is very much that it will still be encouraged for students and staff to use GenAI, but the guidance will just be slightly more detailed. That's all. So like I said, once that is updated, we will make sure that that is shared with you. But in the meantime, the intention is still very much the same, that we encourage the use of it as long as it is done appropriately and ethically. Do you currently talk to your students about the ethical use of GenAI? Is this something that you would actively talk to your students about? Or is this something that you kind of aren't sure if it's your remit, or that it kind of doesn't come up, or it's just something you're not competent to talk about, so you don't? I'm just kind of curious as to where you're at in terms of this. So whether you're all already doing this or not, essentially, is just what I'm curious about. Okay, so a lot of you are already talking to your students about this, which is great news, really great to hear, because of course there's so much to talk to the students about, right? Like there's all the course content, there's all the policies and the guidance and academic integrity and plagiarism and referencing, and you know, there's so many things to talk to students about that sometimes it's really hard to find the time. So it's really great to hear that so many of you are making that effort already and are trying your best to, like we said, kind of preempt that and start them off on the right foot. And some of you, I assume, the sort of sometimes and that if it comes up means that you will be talking to them, for example, like if they commit academic misconduct, you'd then talk to them about GenAI, which again is obviously a really good place to talk to them about that. So this is really good to see and very encouraging that nobody has said no, because it's good to know that you, like I say, you are making the time for that and you do understand that it is really important, because of course it is, we all know this. So that's great to see. So I'm just going to talk briefly about how I talk to students about this. Now, obviously, you may do this completely differently, and I'm not telling you that I do it any better than you do. But this is just sharing how I would do it, and this may give you some ideas if you're not already doing it, or if you feel like you aren't sure how to do it or how to approach it. So like I said, for me, I would try and do it proactively with students. So I wouldn't wait until they do something wrong. I would bring this topic up quite near the start of their learning. Generally, I would link it with an assignment. So if you're talking to them about preparing for an assignment, this is where I would start talking about GenAI. So I'd link it to that assignment, talk about it quite openly, encourage questions and discussion, discuss both the positives and the negatives of it, because I think it's really important that we do give them that balanced viewpoint. Although the university encourages the use of GenAI, I think we as staff have a responsibility to talk to them about the potential downfalls as well. And then demonstrate good practice. So if you use GenAI to create some of your teaching slides, for example, be honest about that with your students, right? Demonstrate that good practice. Yes, I have used GenAI and here I am telling you about it. In the same way that if you use GenAI, I expect you to tell me about it. You know, we need to practice what we preach. So I think that's really, really important as well. So let me get your opinion on this. And this is the kind of thing I would say to students. So if I was talking to them about this, I would say, how is it helpful? What do you use it for? And I would get people to tell me this. So why do we think it's helpful? It saves time. Yes. Number one reason, right? Particularly for us working in education where we are so busy and there are so many conflicting priorities that exactly, it absolutely saves you time. So it saves you time. It helps you to organize things. Yeah, great. Anything else? Yeah, organization again. It corrects your grammar. Yep. Yeah, so I think a lot of our international students will help it to improve their language skills. And that's obviously a really great way of using it for them, because of course, doing an entire degree in a language that is not your first language is incredibly impressive, but also incredibly difficult. So yeah, it can provide you with ideas. It can help you identify sources. Yeah, great. It improves your language. Yeah, exactly. So again, it can kind of extend your vocabulary a lot of the time. It assists with research, Rwandi. Yep. It can adjust your wording. Yep. Yeah, these are all great uses of AI and where it can be really helpful, right? And this is where we do want our students to use it, because of course, increasingly, students we know at university are having to work and have jobs as well as study, because so many of them can't afford to just study full time. They have to work as well. So of course, anything that helps save them time and therefore save them stress is a great thing. And I personally am all for it. Yeah, so exactly, it can give them some new ideas as well, saves the time. Yeah, so these are all great examples of where AI can be really, really helpful. So it can support that learning. It can take on a lot of the kind of, I don't know what I would call, I suppose, admin tasks a lot of the time. It can help with searching. It can help with grammar. It can help with your language skills. It can give you ideas. There's so many things that it can do. And there's so many things for us as staff it can do as well. So, you know, again, if we're using it, which I assume quite a lot of us are, I certainly am, I use it in my job, then I think, you know, we should absolutely be encouraging the students to do that as well. Okay, so I've put some very sort of basic ideas there of, again, this is the kind of thing that I would talk to students about. So what skills can it help you to develop? So in terms of their academic work, it can help them to understand information, so it can explain things to them. So explain a complicated concept, for example. It can confirm their understanding, so they can check that they are right in their understanding of something. So do I understand this concept correctly, for example, or does this mean what I think it means, kind of thing. Critical thinking, so it can help them to get information, but then they need to show that critical thinking. So they need to evaluate the information they are getting from AI in the way they would getting it from anywhere else. So it should be increasing their criticality. It can help with their research skills, because it can help them to do the research, to refine the results. And like we said previously, it can help with their language skills as well. So in terms of their academic work, GenAI can really develop those skills if they are using it appropriately and they're not just using it to replace the work, of course. But this is where it's really, really helpful to them. So we would say the ways in which students should be using it ethically is Firstly, in the planning and learning stage of their assignment. So again, when I talk to students about it, I will link it to their assignment and I'll say, great, so we're all looking at this assignment right now that's due in 3 weeks' time. Let's look at how you can use GenAI to help you with that assignment, shall we? And here's one way you can use it. You can use it in the planning and the learning stage, which is where you're at right now. So you can use it to, like I said, explain a concept. So for example, what is market segmentation, right? If a student doesn't understand that, AI will explain it to them in a way that then helps them understand what they are trying to do within their assignment, right? It can summarize information. So if they don't understand what they need to do for their assignment, so they don't understand the learning objectives, or the assessment rubric, for example, AI can summarize that for them. So summarize this and explain to me what I actually need to do. How do I get those good marks, right? It can provide them with an essay plan. So they can give it a title and say, give me an outline. How would I write this essay? So what would I put in paragraph 1? What would I put in paragraph 2, for example? It can help them find the research, right? So it can help them find journal articles. And it can help summarize research some of the time. So summarize this journal article, or, you know, give me 2 sentences on this journal article so I can figure out whether I actually want to read it or not. So it doesn't replace the reading, the learning, it's just supplementing it, essentially. And like we said, it's that saving time, helping them to be organized. So in the planning stage, these are some examples of how I would say to students, you should absolutely use it for these things. It will save you time. It will make it easier for you. And then we would say you can also use it in the review stage of your assignment. So the writing stage, obviously they need to do themselves. We all know this. That would be academic misconduct if they used it to write the essay for them, right? And I think everybody talks to students about that, of course. But they can use it in the review stage. So they could use it to look at, like we said, their language, so their grammar, their punctuation, the structure or the formatting, the tone of voice that they are using. So these are the kind of review stages. But like I said earlier, we do have studiosity for our students. So we would encourage them for this review stage, they should really be using studiosity. And one of the reasons for that is that studiosity is a secure, closed system. So we know any data that they put into that is entirely secure and safe. And also it has targeted support for Greenwich students. So it will link them to the Greenwich advice on referencing, for example, or further support through the Greenwich website. So that's where, for the kind of review stage, we would really recommend they use Studiosity, which, like I said, is a GenAI model. So we would recommend they use that rather than using ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, whatever it is that they are using for their other stuff. And then, of course, we need to talk to them about where it's not ethical. So the unethical bit would be if you are using it for content creation, so writing the assignment or even rewriting parts of the assignment. So although they can absolutely use it to help improve their language and their grammar, it should be giving them suggestions rather than rewriting the whole thing for them, because of course if it rewrites it, it's no longer their work, it's no longer written by them. So they absolutely shouldn't be using it in any part of the writing stage. And I think, again, it's very important to say that quite openly, and I'm sure everyone is already saying to their students. Okay, so those are all the kind of good things, the ways they should use it. So what do we think the limitations are? So where might there be negatives of GenAI or limitations? Yeah, exactly. So it will give you false information. Yep. Yeah, that's a real doozy, right? Exactly. So hallucinations, yeah. accuracy. So a lot of the time it's not accurate. So it may not be entirely untrue, but it may not be entirely accurate either. There's no innovation, data bias. Yep, absolutely. The wrong facts. Yep. Yep, these are all really, really good answers in terms of where we would want to show caution with the information that GenAI gives us. And again, I think this is where it's really important that we talk to students about this, because of course, GenAI is great. It saves us loads of time, right? But a lot of students don't necessarily understand the limits or the issues with GenAI, at least in my experience. Quite often when you talk to them about this, they are shocked by some of this information. So again, that's where it's really important that we are very open about this in these conversations. So yeah, Rwandi, there's also a lack of critical thinking. Exactly. So AI doesn't show a lot of criticality itself. And of course, there are privacy and security risks for anyone who is using an open AI model. So that's absolutely also an issue. Yep, outdated information, exactly. And it can be incorrect. And a lot of it can be biased as well. Yeah. So again, these are all really, really good answers. And so I'm really pleased that obviously you all know this. But the question is, are we telling our students about this? Are we making sure our students are aware of this? Because that's where we need to, right? So I find quite often, so again, I will ask students this when I talk to them. So I'll say, okay, well, we've talked about the good things. What are the bad things? What are the limitations? And some of the limitations they come up with is, you know, it'll be things like, oh, well, you can't use it that much when you're using the free model. You know, there's limits in like how many questions you can ask. But like quite often they don't say, oh, well, the information is biased and outdated and can be incorrect. And it absolutely wows me that some of them just don't seem to understand that whatsoever. It's horrifying, really. So that's why I think it's so important that we do talk about this. So yeah, so some examples would be where it might provide incorrect references or journal articles. We talked about that earlier. Or providing partly correct journal articles. It can provide poor quality information. It quite often states opinion as fact, which is a real issue. And it gives information that is without context, which obviously can be very dangerous a lot of the time. So that's some examples of things where it's got limitations. And therefore, what students need to be cautious, well, what we all need to be cautious about, really, but obviously we as grown-ups hopefully know this already, is, so like we said, the hallucinations, so where it makes things up. Incorrect information, so where it's taken some bits of information from somewhere online that someone has put up as their opinion, but it's not actually fact and it's actually incorrect. Misinformation, so where people have deliberately put up things that are untrue, but the GenAI doesn't know that, so it presents them as being correct. It will only show things that are freely available. So obviously that is limiting how much information it can provide. So particularly in terms of things like journal articles. Melissa talked about that a little bit yesterday. The lack of criticality, we've talked about that quite a lot. Again, AI is not critical, so it will just present things to you as being fact. The fact that AI reinforces a lot of stereotypes. Because again, it has been trained by humans and humans are biased. We have stereotypes. So a lot of the time AI is repeating those stereotypes and that bias. So again, that's where we need to show that criticality and recognize that. The environmental impact. AI has a huge environmental impact. The amount of water that is used in data centers is unbelievable. And therefore, you know, we are detrimentally affecting the planet every time we use GenAI. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't use it, but we need to be aware of that so that we, to some extent, limit our use. And also exploitation. So a lot of the GenAI models were trained by humans who were essentially being exploited. So humans that were paid very little money and had very bad working conditions to train these GenAI models. So again, you know, we need to be aware of that, and we need to talk about that openly, because it is a real downside of the AI. And that is possibly still happening as the AIs continue to be trained. So again, that is a consideration for whether we are using it or not. So yeah, no, you're right. Some students will absolutely just trust the AI. So this is what I mean. This is where we need to be so open and talk to them about the fact that some of it will be incorrect and some of it will be wrong, and they need to check all their information and be critical, and not just take everything as fact from the Gen AI. So I think it's really important we talk about these things openly. Okay, so I'm just going to get you to do a little exercise if you can. So I'll give you a few minutes. So if anyone is using a Gen AI, which I think a lot of you are for your own work, just open whichever AI you would normally use, and ask for an image of one of the following in that list. And I would just like to see, or you know, for you to see what comes up with that. So I've given some suggestions there. So a librarian, a doctor, a professor, a nurse, a chef, or an engineer. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes if any of you are able to do that, just so that you can kind of have a little look yourself and see whether the result is anything you think is interesting. And again, this is an exercise I will give to students as a kind of example of what, of one thing to kind of look out for, you know, because it's just like a little fun sort of 2-minute thing for them to do. Most of our students certainly will have an AI app on their phone, so it's very quick and easy for them to be able to do this. So I think this is like a nice little exercise just to kind of emphasize some of the points. So I'll just give you another 30 seconds for anyone to do that. If anyone wants to share a result they've got, obviously you can put that in the chat, or you can just sort of say, like, describe it if you want to. Don't feel like you have to, but if anyone wants to, please feel free to pipe up. Otherwise, I will show you what I got when I did a search for a couple of these. Okay, so I'll just give you, I'm mindful of time, so I'll just give you a couple of examples that I found for this. So this is what Copilot generated for me when I asked it for an image of a librarian. Does anyone see where this may be an issue, or where we might use this as a learning example for students? Yeah, Ahmed, yeah, that's very similar to what I got as well. Yeah. Oh, great. So there's some examples in the chat. Excellent. Okay, so interestingly, those of you who can see the chat might have noticed Rwandi is the only one who has an image of a woman there. So here you can see, with your examples as well as mine, where stereotypes and bias are very clear in AI, right? So we have here in the chat generated examples of chefs and doctors, which traditionally those are more male-oriented fields, and AI has largely just produced images of men there. So that is a very clear bias and a very clear stereotype. You can see on my screen where I have asked for an image of a librarian. Again, traditionally, that is a field that is generally staffed by women. And you can see there, so there is an image of a woman, not just a woman, but a white woman wearing glasses and a cardigan, which could not be more stereotypical of a librarian. So you can see, like, live there, essentially, the examples that you get. And then similar to you, Ahmed, I also put in professor. And then, of course, I got a picture of a man there, again, wearing glasses, because that shows he's studious, right? So again, you can just see the bias and the stereotypes that are very clear within AI. So this is where I think this is a really good example, a really good activity to do with students, because they can see it in practice, like very clearly. And of course, you know, sometimes the AI will be better, but I still find most of the time, particularly with images, it's very prevalent, the stereotypes and the biases. So yeah, I think that's something to kind of consider. And like I say, I would do that activity with students every time I talk to them about AI, because I think it just is a really good, quick visual example of them being able to be like, oh yeah, wait, hang on a second. Like, it is getting a lot better, I would say, in terms of having more racial disparity. But again, a lot of things it will default to like white men again, which again is obviously very much bias there, which is something we don't want. So it's very important that we raise that. So we've already done that. I'm gonna skip through that question because I feel like we've already shown very clearly that that was bias. So this is where we talk about the responsible use of AI, right? So one of the things that we can do there to be responsible in our use of AI is we can correct these biases and these stereotypes and these misconceptions, right? So if you ask for an image of a doctor and it shows you a white man with a stethoscope, you can correct that. You can say, no, like, women are doctors too. I would like a picture of a woman, or I would like a picture of someone of color, for example, right? So correct those biases, because the AIs are learning all the time and we can be part of that, right? So I think, to me, that is part of a responsible use of AI, is for us to contribute towards that and to try and get rid of those biases and those stereotypes in our actions. And so to the students, we say, like we said earlier, right, be transparent. This is what academic integrity is about. And this is what the use of GenAI is about. So be transparent. If you are using AI, that is fine. Just admit it, right? So in the same way on that previous slide, I said this image was generated by Copilot, because it was, right? So I'm being transparent about that. Be critical, because like we've said, there is no criticality there, and the things it is providing you with are quite often incorrect. So you have to show criticality. Students need to develop criticality to use AI appropriately. And if they don't, all they're going to do is fail, essentially. Be careful in how you're using it, because again, it is, you don't want to be re-encouraging those biases. You want to show restraint in how you're using it, so that you are reducing the environmental impact. Use it how you're allowed to. So the student should absolutely use it, but they need to use it within the parameters of what the guidance is. And don't let it replace your voice. So don't let the AI start thinking for you. This is the whole point, right? Is it should be, how does Jimmy describe it? I think Jimmy describes it as like a supportive friend, right? So it should be helping you, but it should not be talking for you or replacing your own thoughts or your opinions. So it should just be encouraging you to do this. And so an effective way of doing this is be really specific, right? So again, this is what I would say to students. So the point of AI is to save you time, right? If you are not being specific and detailed in your prompts, it's not going to save you time. And it's also going to be really bad for the environment, because you're going to end up prompting it like 8 different times, right? So think very carefully about what you want to ask it, and ask it that one question, right? So be specific. So I don't just want journal articles on this topic. I want academic journal articles published in the last 5 years on this topic. I don't just want an essay plan on this topic. I want an essay plan for a 3,000 word assignment for a second year undergraduate on this topic, right? So add more detail. Specify what you don't want as well as what you do want, right? So I want you to proofread my assignment, but I don't want you to correct any mistakes. I want you to just point them out, because again, like we said, the AI should not be rewriting things for them, right? And then it sounds really simple, and also kind of rude, but don't use unnecessary language. So don't say please, don't say thank you, because every extra word you put into the AI is worse for the environment, essentially. So it feels rude. I mean, I'm British, so obviously to me, not saying please and thank you is particularly awful. But don't do it, essentially. So I've had to learn that. When I first started using Copilot, I would say, please give me this, please give me this. And now I just say, give me this. And it feels rude, but also, you know, it's about the bigger environmental impact. So it's a very simple way that we can all kind of make a little difference, essentially. And again, this is what I would say to the students. So there is further training that is available. So again, if you are worried about this, you can point your students towards the digital literacy section of the Information Skills for Success module. So again, this is on Moodle. This is self-directed. You can point your students towards this, and this will talk to them about digital literacy, including AI literacy. So good ways in which to use it, things to look out for. So again, you can embed that within your Moodle, or you can just send that to students to say, I want you to look at this and go through this module. And then for staff, Jimmy and his wider team quite often run training sessions throughout the year that are talking about AI. So again, obviously you can book onto any of those if you want to, so just keep an eye on that and those will update. There's less of them at the minute because obviously we're in summer, but once we get back into term 1, those will up again in terms of how many of those there are. And then I've put a bunch of useful links there. And again, I would normally give all of these to students as well. So the responsible use, the AI guidance, how to reference AI, because like Jimmy said the other day, sometimes students do reference it. We wouldn't generally encourage it, but occasionally they do. And then there's also an article there specifically about using Copilot, because like Jimmy said, that's the kind of recommended one through the university where students can access that, or where you can access it as staff, of course.